I never thought the home my mother left me would become a battlefield. When she passed 4 years ago from cancer, she made sure this 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon was mine. Paid off, no mortgage, just mine. My dad remarried 2 years later, and I was genuinely happy for him. He deserved to find love again. But I did not expect his wedding to mark the beginning of a nightmare where his new wife would try to steal my inheritance right from under me with my own father's help. Before I tell you how I had to fight to keep my own home, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever dealt with family trying to take what is rightfully yours, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is going to show you exactly how I took back control when they thought they could just walk in and claim my inheritance. My name is Enrique, and I am 28 years old. I work as a freelance graphic designer, which means I spend most of my days at home working from the office I set up in what used to be my childhood bedroom. The house itself is worth around $450,000. My mother Dorothy bought it with my father back when they were still married, but after their divorce when I was 15, she got the house in the settlement. She worked 2 jobs to keep up with the payments, and finally paid it off 3 years before she died. When Mom got her cancer diagnosis, she did not waste any time getting her affairs in order. She sat me down one evening, her hands shaking, but her voice steady, and told me she was leaving everything to me. The house, her savings, everything. She said she wanted me to have a foundation, a place where I would always be safe. I remember crying that night, not just because I was losing her, but because even in her darkest moment she was thinking about my future. After she passed, I moved into the house full-time. I paid the property taxes every year, kept up with maintenance, mowed the lawn every other week during summer, and made sure the heating system got serviced before winter. This was not just a house to me. It was the last piece of my mother I had left. Every corner held a memory. The kitchen where she taught me to make her famous lasagna. The living room where we watched old movies on Friday nights. The backyard where she planted roses that still bloom every spring. My father Raymond took the divorce hard back in the day, but he and Mom managed to stay civil for my sake. He is 56 now, works as a mechanical engineer, and after the divorce, he moved into a small apartment across town. We kept in touch. Not super close, but we would grab lunch once a month, talk about work, sports, normal father and son stuff. I never held the divorce against him. People grow apart. It happens. About 2 years after Mom died, Dad started seeing someone new. Her name was Diane, and she was 52 years old. She worked in real estate, which I thought was pretty cool at first. She seemed sharp, professional, put together. Dad looked happier than I had seen him in years. They met at some networking event, hit it off, and started dating seriously within a few months. I met Diane for the first time at a coffee shop downtown. She was friendly, asked me about my work, seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. She wore expensive-looking clothes and talked a lot about property values and market trends. Dad looked at her like she hung the moon. I was honestly happy for him. After everything he had been through, he deserved someone who made him smile like that. 8 months into their relationship, Dad called me with big news. He and Diane were getting married. Nothing fancy, just a small ceremony at a nice restaurant with close friends and family. I told him I was thrilled for them, and I meant it. The wedding was lovely. Diane looked beautiful. Dad looked proud, and I genuinely thought this was a new chapter for all of us. But that warm feeling did not last long. The first warning sign came about a week after their wedding. Dad and Diane stopped by the house unannounced. I was working on a client project when I heard the doorbell. I let them in, made some coffee, and we sat in the living room catching up. That is when Diane started looking around with this critical eye like she was evaluating the place. She made her first comment about 20 minutes in. This living room could use better lighting. Maybe some recessed lights in the ceiling. It would really open up the space. I smiled politely and said I liked it the way it was. Then she moved on to the kitchen. The layout is not very efficient. If you knocked out that wall, you could have an open concept design, much more modern. I started to feel a little uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. She works in real estate. Maybe she just cannot help herself. Dad did not say much, just nodded along with whatever Diane said. They stayed for about an hour, then left. I went back to work, but something about the visit sat wrong with me. The second visit happened 2 weeks later. This time Diane brought a folder full of paint samples and some kind of catalog for kitchen cabinets. She spread them out on my dining room table, like she was preparing a pitch. I have some ideas to modernize this place. Trust me, Enrique. These updates would add at least 50,000 to the value. I tried to stay polite. I appreciate it, Diane, but I really like the house the way my mom left it. I am not looking to change anything right now. She looked genuinely surprised, like she could not understand why I would turn down her help. But these are just suggestions. You should at least think about it. Dad jumped in then. She is just trying to help son. You know she works in real estate. She knows what adds value to a property. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced a smile. I understand that, Dad. But this is my home, and I am comfortable with it as it is. They left shortly after, and I noticed Diane looked a little irritated. Dad squeezed my shoulder on the way out and told me to think about what Diane had said. I closed the door and stood there for a minute, feeling like I had just been pressured into something I did not ask for. The third visit was when things really started to feel wrong. Diane asked me about the house paperwork. We were sitting in the kitchen, and she casually brought it up like she was making small talk. So, just curious, Enrique, is the house fully paid off? No mortgage or anything? I felt alarm bells go off in my head, but I answered honestly. Yes. My mom made sure of that before she passed. Why do you ask? She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Oh, no reason. Just making conversation. I work with properties all day, so I guess it is a habit to ask these questions. I nodded, but I did not believe her. Something about the way she asked felt calculated. When they left that day, I sat down and pulled out all the paperwork for the house, just to make sure everything was still in order. My name was on the deed. Everything was legal and clear. Still, I could not shake the feeling that Diane was digging for information. Then came the real turning point. It was about 2 months after their wedding when Dad called me one afternoon. He sounded stressed. Hey, son, we have a bit of a situation. The apartment we are renting, the building management just told us they need to do some major plumbing repairs. The whole place is going to be torn up for at least a week, maybe more. Is there any way Diane and I could stay with you for a few days, just until they finish the work? I hesitated. Having them stay over felt like opening a door. I was not sure I wanted to open, but this was my dad. How could I say no? Sure, Dad. You guys can take the guest room. They showed up that evening with 2 huge suitcases, which seemed like a lot for just a few days, but I did not say anything. I helped them carry the bags upstairs, showed them where everything was, and told them to make themselves at home. Big mistake. The first night was fine. We ordered pizza, watched some television, and it almost felt normal. But by the second day, I started noticing changes. I came downstairs in the morning to find Diane reorganizing my refrigerator. She had moved everything around, thrown out some of my leftovers, and rearranged the shelves by category. I am just organizing while we are here, she said with a bright smile. You had things kind of all over the place. I bit my tongue. It is just a fridge, not worth starting an argument over. Then I noticed she had moved things around in the kitchen cabinets too. My coffee mugs were in a different spot. The spices were arranged alphabetically. My dish towels were folded in some fancy way I had never bothered with. By the end of the first week, they still had not mentioned leaving. I asked Dad about the apartment repairs, and he said they were taking longer than expected. Another week passed, then another. Every time I brought it up, there was a new excuse. The workers found more damage. The building inspector needed to sign off on something. They were waiting for parts to arrive. Meanwhile, Diane was acting more and more like she owned the place. She started inviting people over without asking me. I came home from a coffee shop one afternoon to find 4 strangers sitting in my living room drinking wine and laughing. Diane introduced them as her friends from the real estate office. "Oh, Enrique, these are my friends. I was just showing them around. You have such a lovely home." I felt my blood pressure spike. "You cannot just invite people over without asking me. This is my house." She looked genuinely hurt, like I had just insulted her. "I thought we were family now. Your dad and I are married. I did not think I needed permission to have friends over." Dad walked in then and immediately took her side. "Come on, Enrique. Do not overreact. They are just having some wine." "What is the big deal?" "The big deal is that nobody asked me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This is my home. I deserve to know when people are going to be here." Diane gathered her friends, and they left in a flurry of awkward goodbyes. After they were gone, Dad pulled me aside and told me I was being ungrateful. "She is trying to make this place feel like home for all of us. You need to be more flexible." I went to bed that night furious and confused. How had this become my fault? But what I heard a few nights later changed everything. I woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom. As I passed the guest room, I heard voices. Dad and Diane were still awake, talking in low tones. I should have kept walking, but something made me stop and listen. Diane was speaking. "Once we establish residency here, we can claim partial ownership. Oregon law allows it under certain circumstances." Dad sounded uncertain. "Are you sure this will work?" "Trust me, Raymond. I have seen this done before. If we live here long enough and contribute to expenses, we can file for co-ownership, especially since you are his father. Family has rights." My heart stopped. I stood there in the dark hallway, barely breathing, trying to process what I was hearing. They were planning to take my house, my mother's house, the inheritance she worked so hard to leave me. I went back to my room, but I did not sleep the rest of the night. I just stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. How long had they been planning this? Was the apartment story even true, or was it all a setup from the beginning? The next morning, I confronted Dad. I walked into the kitchen where he was making coffee and just came out with it. "I heard you and Diane talking last night about claiming ownership of my house." His face went pale. "You were eavesdropping. You were plotting to steal my inheritance." I shot back. "Do not turn this around on me." He tried to deny it at first, said I must have misheard, but I did not let him off the hook. Then Diane walked in, and she did not even bother pretending anymore. She just looked at me with this cold expression and said, "Look, Enrique, this house is too big for just you. Your father deserves to live here too. He is your dad. Family should share." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My mother left this house to me. Not you, not even Dad. This is my inheritance. But family should share, she repeated. Besides, I have been researching Oregon property law. If we live here for 6 months and contribute to household expenses, we can legally claim an interest in the property. I walked away before I said something I would regret. I went straight to my computer and started digging through my email. That is when I found it. An email from a lawyer I did not recognize, sent to this address, referencing Diane as a co-resident and asking about legal options for establishing shared ownership. She had been using my home address to contact lawyers. She had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. I felt sick. Then Dad came into my office and finally dropped the act. "Look, son, my apartment lease is ending next month. We need a place to stay. You have 3 bedrooms here. Why can you not just share?" "Because this is not about sharing," I said, my voice shaking. "This is about you and your wife trying to take what my mother left for me. Do you have any idea how that feels? She worked herself to the bone to pay off this house, and now you want to just swoop in and claim it." He did not have an answer for that. He just stood there looking defeated. And for the first time I realized my father had become someone I did not recognize. I did not sleep that night either. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every possible scenario. By the time the sun came up, I knew what I had to do. This was my home. my mother's legacy, and I was not going to let anyone take it from me, not even my own father. I waited until Dad and Diane left the house the next morning. They were going to some wedding for one of Diane's co-workers and would not be back until late that night. As soon as their car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone and called a property lawyer named Patrick that a friend had recommended. He was in his 50s, specialized in real estate and inheritance law, and he agreed to see me that same afternoon. Patrick's office was in a building downtown, all dark wood and leather chairs. I sat across from his desk and told him everything. The inheritance, the wedding, the way Dad and Diane had moved in under false pretenses, the conversation I had overheard, the email to the other lawyer. I showed him the deed to my house, my mother's will, everything I had. He listened carefully, taking notes. And when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and gave me a straight answer. Enrique, you are the sole legal owner of that property. Your mother's will is clear. There is no legal basis whatsoever for your father or his wife to claim any ownership. Oregon does not have laws that would allow them to just take partial ownership because they lived there for a few months. What about the residency thing Diane mentioned? I asked. Patrick shook his head. That is not how it works. Even if they establish residency, that does not give them ownership rights. It might give them tenant rights, which means you would have to go through a formal eviction process to remove them. But they cannot claim ownership of your property without your consent. The only way their names get on that deed is if you voluntarily add them, which I strongly advise you not to do. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed immediately by anger. So they were just lying, trying to scare me into giving up my house. It sounds like it, Patrick said. But here is the problem. If you let them stay much longer, removing them could get complicated. Once someone establishes tenancy, even without a lease, you have to follow legal eviction procedures. That can take months. My advice: remove them now today if possible, and change your locks immediately. Can I do that? Just kick them out. Legally, yes. They are guests in your home. You have the right to ask them to leave at any time. If they refuse, then it becomes trespassing, and you can call the police. But the longer you wait, the murkier it gets. Act now, while you still have clear legal ground. I left Patrick's office with a plan. I called a locksmith and scheduled him to come that afternoon, while Dad and Diane were still out. Then I called my two closest friends, Jake and Marcus. I explained the situation, and they both agreed to come over and help me pack up Dad and Diane's belongings. Jake showed up first. He is a software engineer, tall and quiet, but incredibly loyal. He brought his camera. Document everything, he said. If this turns into a legal thing, you will want proof that you did not damage their property or act irresponsibly. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. He works in construction, built like a linebacker, and he has always had my back. What do you need, man? He asked. Help me pack their stuff and be here when they get back, I said. I do not think this is going to go smoothly. We started in the guest room. I was meticulous. Every item of clothing was carefully folded and placed in boxes. Toiletries were wrapped and packed. I did not want to give them any reason to accuse me of damaging their belongings. Jake filmed the entire process, narrating what we were doing, showing that everything was handled with care. The locksmith arrived at 3 in the afternoon. He was a middle-aged guy named Ron who did not ask questions, just got to work. He changed the locks on the front door, the back door, and the garage. He gave me 3 new sets of keys and told me the old ones were now useless. I paid him, thanked him, and he left. By 5 in the evening, everything was packed. We had loaded all of Dad and Diane's belongings into neat boxes and stacked them carefully in the garage. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was missing. Jake had video evidence of the entire process. Now we wait, I said. Jake and Marcus sat with me in the living room. We ordered food, tried to watch something on television, but I could not focus. My heart was pounding. I kept checking my phone, watching the time crawl by. Dad and Diane were supposed to be back around 9 o'clock. They arrived at 9:15. I heard their car pull into the driveway, heard the doors slam. heard footsteps on the walkway. Then I heard Diane trying to put her key in the lock. It did not work. She tried again, and again. Then the pounding started. "Enrique, what is going on? Open the door." I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it just a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged. Dad and Diane stood on the porch looking confused and angry. "Why did you change the locks?" Dad demanded. "What is this about?" I looked him right in the eye. "You both need to leave. This is my house, and you tried to steal it from me." Diane immediately went into defense mode. "Steal? We are family. We were just staying temporarily while our apartment was being fixed." I pulled out my phone and played the recording I had made of their conversation, the one where Diane talked about claiming ownership. I had transferred it from my voice memo app, and the audio was crystal clear. "Once we establish residency, we can claim partial ownership." Diane's face turned white. Dad looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. "You recorded us," Dad said, his voice barely a whisper. "You plotted to take my house," I replied. "I did what I had to do to protect myself." Diane recovered quickly, her shock turning into anger. "You, ungrateful brat. Your father deserves this house more than you. He worked hard his whole life. My mother worked hard her whole life," I said, my voice rising. "She worked 2 jobs to keep this house. She made sure it was paid off before she died so I would have something. This is my inheritance. Not yours, not even his. Mine, and you are not taking it." Dad tried a different approach. "Son, where are we supposed to go? That is not my problem anymore," I said, and I meant it. "Your belongings are in the garage. All of them. Nothing is damaged. Take them and go." Diane was not done. "We will sue you. You cannot just throw us out." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "My lawyer is ready. You have 0 legal claim to this house. 0. And if you try to pursue this, I will countersue for fraud and attempted theft." That shut her up. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Jake and Marcus appeared behind me, standing in the doorway. Dad looked at them, then back at me, and something in his face changed. He realized I was serious. "This was not a bluff. Dad and I will get the boxes," he said quietly to Diane. They walked to the garage. I watched from the doorway as they loaded box after box into their car. Diane kept muttering under her breath, but Dad was silent. It took them 3 trips. Finally, everything was loaded. Before they got in the car, Dad turned back to me one last time. "I am sorry it came to this." I looked at my father, this man I had loved and respected my whole life, and I felt nothing but disappointment. "You chose her over your own son. You chose to try and take what Mom left me instead of just being happy I had a home. I will not forget that." He did not have a response. He just got in the car. Diane shot me one last venomous glare before slamming the passenger door. They drove away, and I watched until their taillights disappeared around the corner. I closed the door, locked it with the new key, and finally let myself breathe. The first few days after that night were hard. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dad called me twice. I did not answer. He left voicemails saying we needed to talk, that he wanted to explain. I deleted them without listening all the way through. Diane sent me several emails, each one more threatening than the last. She claimed I had illegally evicted them, that she had contacted a lawyer, that I would be hearing from them soon. I forwarded every email to Patrick, my lawyer. He reviewed them and told me not to worry. Empty threats. They have no case. A week later, Patrick called me with an update. I reached out to the lawyer Diane contacted. Apparently she did consult with him, but after reviewing the facts, he told her she had no legal standing. He declined to take her case. She is bluffing. That news should have made me feel better, but I still felt hollow inside. I had just cut my father out of my life. Yes, he had tried to steal from me, but he was still my dad. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who came to my high school graduation, who sat with me in the hospital when Mom was dying. How had we gotten here? Jake and Marcus checked in on me every day that first week. They would stop by after work, bring food, make sure I was okay. We did not always talk about what happened. Sometimes we just watched sports or played video games, and I appreciated that more than they knew. About a month after I changed the locks, I decided to make some changes to the house. Not because Diane had suggested it, but because I needed to reclaim the space as my own. I repainted the guest room, the one Dad and Diane had stayed in. I chose a deep blue color, something calming. I replaced the curtains, bought a new bedspread, and turned it into a proper office space for my design work. In the kitchen, I rearranged everything back to the way Mom had it. Coffee mugs in the cabinet by the sink, spices in the Lazy Susan, dish towels in the drawer by the stove. It felt like putting the house back in order, like restoring something that had been violated. I also started going through old photo albums. Pictures of Mom and me at the beach. Photos from my high school graduation. Christmas mornings. I'd avoided looking at these for years because it hurt too much, but now I found comfort in them. Mom was smiling in every picture. She looked so proud. One evening, I was sitting in the living room with one of those albums open on my lap when I realized something. I had done the right thing. Protecting this house was not about being selfish or greedy. It was about honoring what my mother had worked so hard to give me. She had wanted me to have security, stability, a foundation, and I had fought to keep that. She would have been proud. My work started picking up again, too. When you are a freelancer, your mental state directly affects your productivity, and I had been a mess for weeks. But as I started to heal, my creativity came back. I landed a big contract with a marketing firm designing a whole campaign for a new product launch. The money was good, and the work was fulfilling. Jake convinced me to start going to the gym with him. At first I resisted, but eventually I gave in. Turns out lifting weights and running on a treadmill is a great way to work through anger and stress. I started going 3 times a week, and I felt stronger, not just physically, but mentally too. Marcus invited me to a barbecue at his place one Saturday. His whole family was there. Kids running around his wife, making her famous potato salad, everyone laughing and talking. It reminded me that family is not just about blood. It is about the people who show up for you when things get hard. Marcus and Jake had been there for me when my own father was not. That meant something. About 6 months after everything went down, I was in a much better place. The house felt like mine again. I had established new routines, new memories that were not tainted by what had happened. I even started dating someone, a woman named Brielle. I met at a coffee shop. She was a teacher, kind and funny, and she did not pressure me to talk about my family drama until I was ready. One night I was sitting alone in the living room, the same spot where Mom and I used to watch movies together. There was a framed photo of her on the side table, one of my favorites. She was in the garden holding a bunch of roses she had just cut, smiling at the camera. I picked up the frame and looked at her face. Mom would be proud that I stood my ground, I said out loud. And I believed it. She had left me this house because she wanted me to have security. She wanted me to be taken care of. And I had honored that by refusing to let anyone, even my own father, take it away from me. I learned something important through all of this. Boundaries matter, even with family. Especially with family. Love does not mean letting people walk all over you. It does not mean sacrificing your own well-being to make someone else comfortable. Sometimes loving yourself means saying no to people who want to take advantage of you. I also learned that not everyone deserves access to your life. I had spent years trying to maintain a relationship with my father, out of obligation, out of some sense that I owed him something because he was my dad. But the truth is, he had shown me exactly who he was when he chose to side with Diane and her scheme. People show you who they are through their actions. I just had to be willing to see it. The house is still here. It is still mine. The roses Mom planted still bloom, every spring. I water them, prune them, and talk to them like she used to. The kitchen still smells like coffee every morning. The living room still has the same couch, where we used to curl up and watch movies. But now, it also has new memories. Jake and Marcus coming over for game nights. Brielle and I cooking dinner together, laughing when we burn the garlic bread. Me working late in my new office, landing clients and building my business. This house is not just a shrine to the past anymore. It is a foundation for my future, exactly like Mom intended. Do I miss my father? Sometimes. I miss the version of him I thought. I knew the one who would never have tried to steal from his own son. But that man either never really existed or he changed when he married Diane. Either way, I cannot have him in my life, not after what he tried to do, and I have made peace with that. Standing in this living room, looking at my mother's picture, I feel something I have not felt in a long time. Peace. Real, deep, lasting peace. I protected what she left me. I stood up for myself. I set boundaries and enforced them even when it hurt. The house is quiet now. Just me, the sound of the heater kicking on the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. And it is perfect. This is my home, my sanctuary, my foundation. And no one is ever going to take that from me again. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? Drop a comment below and share your story. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more real-life stories about standing your ground and protecting what is yours. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it is okay to set boundaries even with the people you love. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it gave you the courage to protect what matters most to you. Remember, honoring the people who loved you sometimes means defending what they left behind, no matter who tries to take it. Take care of yourselves out there, and never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting your peace.